Daf Yomi, Tractate, Shevuos, page 16. A, top of the page, with the words Al Pi Navi Nacheles Al Pi Navi Nisrefes. Based on a ruling of a prophet, the loaves of one thanks offering were eaten, and based on a ruling of a prophet, the loaves of the other thanks offering were burned. The prophets Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi, who lived at the time of Ezra and Nehemiah's reconsecration of Jerusalem, instructed the people concerning how the ceremony should be conducted without providing reasons for the procedures. Kol shelo nasis b'chol elu kule itmar Rav Huna Amar b'chol elu tnan Rav Nachman Amar b'achas mikol elu tnan. The Mishnah teaches, and with regard to any addition to the temple that was not made with all these ceremonial procedures, one who enters there while ritually impure is not liable. It was stated that Amoraim disagreed about the text of the Mishnah. Rav Huna says, we learned in the Mishnah with all these, which means that all of these procedures are indispensable. And if even one is missing, the consecration does not take effect. Rav Nachman says, we learned in the Mishnah with one of all these, meaning any one of these procedures suffices for the consecration to take effect. Rav Huna Amar b'chol elu tnan kasavar kedusha rishona kiddush l'shata v'kedusha le'atid lavo be'ezra zecher ba'alma hu de'ava. The Gemara further clarifies this disagreement. Rav Huna says, we learn in the Mishnah with all these. The Gemara explains, he maintains that the initial consecration of the temple in the days of David and Solomon sanctified it for its time and sanctified it forever. Therefore, the site of the temple retained its original sanctity even during the days of the second temple. And Ezra, who reconsecrated the area, did so merely as a commemoration of the initial consecration. Accordingly, even though there was no king or Urim v'Tumim, the entire area was fully consecrated. By contrast, in order to consecrate an area that had not been part of the initial consecration, all of these procedures are necessary and none can be omitted. Rav Nachman Amar ba'achas mikol elu tnan kasavar kedusha rishona kitcha l'sha'ata velo kitcha la'atid lavo ve'ezra kedoshe kadish af al gav delo havo urim betumim. Rav Nachman says we learned in the Mishnah with one of all these. The Gemara explains, he maintains that the initial consecration of the temple sanctified it for its time only and did not sanctify it forever. And Ezra consecrated the temple and its courtyards even though there was no king or Urim v'Tumim. Consequently, it follows that there is no need for all of these procedures in order for the consecration to take effect. Esvei Rove Rav Nachman Kol shelo nasis b'chol elu Tani b'achas mikol elu. Rava raised an objection to Rav Nachman. The Mishnah explicitly states any addition that was not made with all these procedures Rav Nachman said to him, amend the Mishnah and teach it as stating with one of all these procedures. Tashima Avashol Omer Shnei Vitzin Ahayu Bahar HaMishcha Tachtona V'Elyona Tachtona Nitkadsha B'chol Elu Elyona Lo Nitkadsha B'chol Elu Ela Be'ole Gola Shelo B'Melech V'Shelo Be'urim B'Tumim. The Gemara cites a proof against the opinion of Rav Nachman. Come in here a Braita. Abba Shaul says there were two ponds on the Mount of Olives, a lower pond and an upper pond. The lower pond was consecrated during the time of the first temple with all procedures mentioned in the Mishnah. And it has the sanctity of Jerusalem for all purposes. But by contrast, the upper pond was not consecrated with all these procedures, but rather it was consecrated by those who returned from the exile in Babylonia without a king and without the Urim Tumim. Tachtona shehaisa kedushata gemura amei haaretz nichnasin lesham ve'ochlin sham kodshim kalim aval lo maaser sheni v'chaverim ochlin sham kodshim kalim maaser sheni. The Braita continues with regard to the lower pond, whose consecration was complete, Amei Haaretz, uneducated people, who were not scrupulous in their observance of the mitzvot relating to tithes and to ritual purity, would enter into there and would partake of offerings of lesser sanctity that may be eaten in all of Jerusalem there, but they would not partake of second tithe there because they conducted themselves stringently concerning this matter. And Chaverim, who were meticulous in their observance of those mitzvot, would partake of both offerings of lesser sanctity and second tithe there. Elyona shelo hayta kedushat hagemura amei haaretz hayu nichnasin lesham ve'ochlin sham kodshim kalim aval lo maaser sheni ve'chaverim ein ochlin sham lo kodshim kalim ve'lo maaser sheni. ומפני מה לא קידשוה שהם מוסיפין על העיר ועל הזרועס אלא למלך ולאורים טובים ובסנהדרין של 71 ובשתי תוידס ובשיר. The Braita continues, as for the upper pond, whose consecration was incomplete, Amei Haaretz would enter into there and partake of offerings of lesser sanctity there, but they would not partake of second tithe there. And Chaverim would partake of neither offerings of lesser sanctity nor tithe there. And for what reason did they not consecrate the upper pond? It was because additions can be made to the city of Jerusalem or to the temple courtyards only by a special body comprising the king, a prophet, the Urim Tumim, and the Sanhedrin of 71, and with two thanks offerings, and with a special song. V'lama kidshuha, lama kidshuha, v'amrit lo kidshuha, ela lama hichnisuha, mepnei shetorfa shel Yerushalayim hayta, v'nocha hi lichavesh misham. The Gemara asks, but why did they consecrate the upper pond if they could not do so properly? This Gemara responds, why did they consecrate it? Didn't you say that they did not consecrate it? Rather, the question should be asked as follows. Given that they could not consecrate the upper pond, why did they bring it within the walls of the city? The Gemara answers, because it was a weak point of Jerusalem, and it would have been easy to conquer the city from there. It became necessary to include it within the wall. This Braita seems to present explicit proof against the opinion of Rav Nachman, who holds that there is no need for all the procedures listed in the Mishnah in order for the consecration to be complete. Tanaihi Titania Amar Rabbi Eliezer Shamati Kishayu Bonin Behechal Asu Klaim Lehechal Uklaim Lazaois El Shebehechal Bonin Mi Bachutz Uvazaois Bonin Mi Bifni. Gemara rejects this proof. This is a dispute between Tanaim as to whether the initial consecration of Jerusalem and the temple sanctified them only for their time or forever. Abba Shaul maintains that the initial consecration lapsed, and therefore the consecration required all of the procedures mentioned in the Mishnah. Where is this dispute taught? As it is taught in a Mishnah, in Eduyot 8:6, Rabbi Eliezer says, I heard that when they were building the sanctuary in the second temple, they fashioned temporary curtains for the sanctuary and temporary curtains for the courtyards to serve as partitions until the construction of the stone walls was completed. The difference was only that in the sanctuary, the workers built the walls outside the curtains without entering, and in the courtyard, the workers built the walls within the curtains. Amar Yehoshua, Shamati Shimakri v'naf al pi she'en ba'is, ochlin kodshei kadashim, af al pi she'en klaim, kadashim kalim, u'masir she'eni, af al pi she'en choma, mipnei she'kedusha rishuna, kitshua, sha'ata, v'kitshua latid lavo. Lav miklal de Rabbi Eliezer savar lo kitshah le'atid lavo. The Mishnah continues. Rabbi Yehoshua says, I heard that one sacrifices offerings on the altar even if there is no temple, and one partakes of offerings of the most sacred order in the temple courtyard even if there are no curtains, and one partakes of offerings of lesser sanctity and second-type produce in Jerusalem even if there is no wall surrounding the city. This is due to the fact that the initial consecration sanctified the temple and Jerusalem for their time, and also sanctified them forever. The Gemara concludes from the fact that Rabbi Yehoshua based his opinion on the principle that the initial consecration sanctified the temple and Jerusalem forever. One can not learn by inference that Rabbi Eliezer maintains that it did not sanctify them forever. Apparently, this issue is the subject of a dispute between Tanaim. Amar le Rabbi Lavashi mimai dima de Chuliam kuchushaita kuchushaita v'kishos elavoi umar mai de Shemia le kamar umar mai de Shemia le kamar. Ravina said to Rashi, from where do you draw this inference? Perhaps everyone maintains that the initial consecration sanctified the temple and Jerusalem for their time and also sanctified them forever, as one sage, Rabbi Eliezer, stated that tradition which he heard from his teachers, and one sage, Rabbi Yehoshua, stated that tradition which he heard from his teachers, and there is no dispute between them. And if you would say, why do I need curtains at all? According to Rabbi Eliezer, the original sanctity remained when Jerusalem was not surrounded by walls, and similarly, the presence or absence of curtains is irrelevant to the sanctity of the temple area. The Gemara answers, the curtains were established merely for seclusion, as it would have been unbecoming for the activity in this most sacred venue to be visible to all. Okay. All right. Ela ha'ani tanai the tani amash Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi lama mana chacham ezelu kishigash b'nei goyim masu elu v'kitshum aval rishon isbatu mishibat la'aretz alma kasavar kedusha rishona kedusha l'shata v'lo kitshu l'ased lava. Rather, this matter is subject to a dispute between these Tanaim, as it is taught in a Braita with regard to walled cities listed in the Mishnah in Tractate Arachin 32a. Rabbi Ishmael, son of Rabbi Yossi, said, "Why did the sages enumerate specifically these 9 cities as cities that were walled since the days of Joshua, son of Nun? In fact, there were many more. The reason is that when the exiles ascended to Eretz Israel from Babylonia in the time of Ezra, they found these cities and consecrated them as walled cities. But the sanctity of the first walled cities, enumerated in the book of Joshua, was nullified when settlement in Eretz Israel was negated and the Jewish people were exiled." The Gemara comments, apparently, Rabbi Ishmael, son of Rabbi Yossi, maintains the initial consecration sanctified the temple and Jerusalem for their time only, and did not sanctify them forever. Urimenu, the Gemara raises a contradiction. Amar Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi v'chi elu b'levad hayu ve'alo kfar nemar shishim ir kol chevel argov מממלכת Og בבשן, כל אלה ערים בצורות קומה גבוה. אלא למה אמרנו חכמים את אלו שכשאלו בני הגוי למצוא אלו בקידשום. The Gemara raises a contradiction from a different Braita. Ishmael, son of Yossi, says, were these cities that are enumerated in Tractate Arachin the only walled cities? But isn't it already stated 60 cities, all the region of Argob, the king of Og, the king of Bashan, kingdom of Og, the kingdom of Bashan, all these were cities fortified with high walls, gates and bars, Deuteronomy 3, 4, and 5. Okay? Indicating that there were many walled cities in the time of Joshua. Rather, why then did the sages enumerate specifically these cities? It is due to the fact that when the exiles ascended from Babylonia, they found these and consecrated them as walled cities. The Gemara asks, they consecrated them? If their sanctity remained, it should not have been necessary to consecrate them. Now, don't we say later in the same Braita that it is not necessary to consecrate them? The Gemara clarifies, rather, this is what the Braita means to say. When the exiles ascended from Babylonia, they found these and enumerated them. V'lo elu bilvad ela kol shetalev yodcha mesores yavoisecha shemukefes choyma mimos Yehoshua bin Nun kol mitzvos elu nuhagos ba mipnei שקידושה ראשונה קידשה שאתה בקידשה לדוד לבוא. כאשר רבי ישמעאל ברבי יוסי רבי ישמעאל ברבי יוסי. The Braita continues, and not only these, but in any city with regard to which you receive a tradition from your ancestors that it was surrounded by a wall from the days of Joshua, son of Nun. All these mitzvot with regard to walled cities are observed in it due to the fact that the initial consecration sanctified the temple of Jerusalem for their time and sanctified them forever. The Gemara comments this is difficult as there is a contradiction between one statement of Rabbi Ishmael bar Yossi and another statement of Rabbi Ishmael bar Yossi. Ibo Yisema Trei Tanoya Rabbi Ishmael bar Yossi. Ibo Yisema Chada Minayhu Rabbi Elazar bar Yossi Amra Tanya Rabbi Elazar bar Yossi אומר אשר לו חומה אף על פי שאין לו עכשיו והיה לו קודם לכן. The Gemara answers, if you wish, say that there are two Tanaim who disagree with regard to the opinion of Rabbi Ishmael bar Yossi. Each transmitted Rabbi Ishmael's opinion in a different manner. And if you wish, say instead that one of the traditions is mistaken, and one of the Braita was stated by Rabbi Elazar bar Yossi, and not his brother Rabbi Ishmael, as it is taught in the Braita. Rabbi Elazar Bar Yossi says that the verse with regard to walled city states, which has no wall. Which has a wall. I'm sorry. Asher, which does have a wall. Yeah, which has a wall. Asher lo choma. Sorry, I mistook the lo for no. Leviticus 25:30. The word lo is written with an aleph, meaning no. And accordingly, the verse would be stating to the contrary, that the city does not have a wall, but its vocalization is in the sense of a homonym. It's homonym lo with a vav, meaning it has a wall. So you could say asher lo choma, or meaning to a wall, but lo choma, no wall. It's written lamed vav aleph. Interesting. Meaning it has a wall. This indicates that even if it does not presently have a wall, but it had a wall previously, it retains its status as a walled city. It is Rabbi Elazar Bar Yossi who maintains that the first consecration sanctified the temple and Jerusalem forever. And now we are turning to Daf 16b, the second side of the page, and continuing Daf B on the top of the page with the words Nitma be'azara v'ne'alma mimenu tumeh v'chulei. Tuma be'azara min Alan Rabbi Elazar kasev echad omer es mishkan Hashem timeh because echad omer ki es mikdash Hashem timeh im eno inyan letuma shebachutz tanehu inyan letuma shebifnim. The Mishnah teaches about one who was ritually pure when he entered the temple, but became impure while in the temple courtyard, and afterward his impurity was hidden from him. The Gemara asks, from where do we derive that one is liable even if he contracted impurity in the temple courtyard and failed to leave immediately by way of the shortest route, and not only if he entered the temple courtyard when he was already impure? Rabbi Elazar says one verse states he has defiled the tabernacle of the Lord, Numbers 19:13, and one verse states for he has defiled the temple of the Lord, Numbers 19:20. If this second verse is not needed for the matter of one who contracted impurity outside before he entered the temple courtyard, as this situation is already referred to in the previous verse, apply it to the matter of one who contracted impurity inside the temple courtyard. ואם נאמר מקדש ולא נאמר משכן, הייתי אומר, על מקדש יהיה חייב, שהרי קדושתו קדוש העולם, המשכן לא יהיה חייב. לכך נאמר משכן, לכך נאמר מקדש. The Gemara asks, but is it really superfluous to have both of these verses? One having been sufficient, aren't they each necessary to teach a novel ruling? As it is taught in Braita, Rabbi Elazar says, it is stated, tabernacle. Why does it state temple? If it stated tabernacle, why does it state temple? And if it states temple, why does it state tabernacle? He explains, had the verse stated only tabernacle and not stated temple, I would have said that one is liable for entering the tabernacle in a state of impurity since it was anointed with the anointing oil, and therefore it carries greater sanctity. But he is not liable for entering the temple, which is not anointed with the anointing oil. And had the verse stated only temple and not stated tabernacle, I would have said that one is liable for entering the temple in a state of impurity, since his sanctity is an eternal sanctity, but he is not liable for entering the tabernacle, whose sanctity was only for his time. For this reason it is stated tabernacle, and for this reason it is stated temple. Rabbi Elazar Mechdi. Or Mikdi Mishkan. Sorry, not Mechdi. Mikdi Mishkan Ikri Mikdash. Mishkan Mikri Mikdash. Mishdash Ikri Mishkan. Mikdash Ikri Mishkan. Nichtov O Idi Ve'idi Mikdash. O Idi Ve'idi Mishkan. Mishkan Mikdash Tamali Shmamina Tati. The Gemara answers Rabbi Elazar did not base his derivation on a superfluous verse, but on the change in the wording between the two verses. This is what is difficult for him. Since the tabernacle is also called temple, and the temple is also called tabernacle, then let the verse write either in both verses, temple, or in both verses, tabernacle. Why do I need both tabernacle and temple? Conclude two conclusions from it, meaning that one is liable even for impurity contracted inside the grounds, and that the halakha applies both in the tabernacle and in the temple. Bishlom Mikdash Ikre Mishkan. Tichsiv Zadi Mishkan Mizarchem Ela Mishkan. Dikri Mikdash Minalan Ilim Mechtiv. Minasama Kahatim. Nosea Mikdash. Hu Baron Kitiv. Ela Mehacha Asuli Mikdash Mishkan V'cham. Uchetiv Kechol Asher Ani Mareotcha Tavid Mishkan. The Gemara questions its previous assumption. Granted, the temple is also called tabernacle, as it is written, and I will set my tabernacle among you, Leviticus 26:11, where the reference is to the temple, as the verse is referring to all that which will transpire after the Jewish people have settled in their land. But from where do we derive that the tabernacle is also called temple? If we say that it is derived from that which is written, and the Kahathites, and the bearer of the temple set forward, Numbers 10:21, that instance of the term temple is not written with regard to the tabernacle. Rather, it is written with regard to the ark and the other sacred vessels. Rather, it is derived from here. And let them make me a temple, that I may dwell among them. Exodus 25:8, where the reference is to the tabernacle, as immediately afterward is written, according to all that I show you, the pattern of the tabernacle. Exodus 25:9. V'ishtachava sheha k'dei ishtachava amar Rava lo shalela sheishtachava klape panim aval ishtachava klape chutz shaha in lo shalo. The Mishnah teaches if he bowed down, or he tarried in the temple courtyard long enough to bow down, or he went out by way of a longer route when he could have taken a shorter route, he is liable to bring a sliding scale offering. Rava says they taught this only when he bowed down in the temple courtyard facing inward toward the Holy of Holies, as that alone is proper bowing. But if he bowed down facing outward, that is not considered bowing. And when he bows facing outward, if he tarried in the temple courtyard long enough to bow down, yes, he is liable. But if he did not tarry long enough to bow down, he is not liable. אף על גב לא כלומר, שתחול כלפי פנים, או כדי השתחווה בהך, השתחווה כלפי חוץ חיה. There are those who teach the statement of Rava with regard to the latter clause, or he tarried in the temple courtyard, long enough to bow down, he is liable to bring a sliding scale offering. It may be said by inference that bowing down itself entails tarrying, and the mere act of bowing does not render one liable. With regard to this, Rava says they taught this only when he bowed down facing outward. In such a case, he is liable only if he tarried long enough to bow down, but if he bowed down facing inward toward the Holy of Holies, he is liable even if he did not tarry for that length of time. And this is what the Mishnah is saying. If he bowed down facing inward, or if he tarried long enough to bow down while he was bowing down facing outward, he is liable. Ba Shehia Zukriya Ba'almahi. De'iz Ba Shehia Pishut Yadayim Reglaim. The Gemara asks, what are the circumstances of bowing in which there is tarrying, and what are the circumstances of bowing in which there is no tarrying? The Gemara answers, with regard to bowing in which there is no tarrying, that is merely kneeling. As for bowing in which there is tarrying, that is prostrating oneself while spreading one's arms and legs in total submission. V'kama shiur shehia pligi ba Rabbi Yitzchak bar Nachmani v'chad de'ime umanu Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi v'amri la Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi v'chad de'ime umanu Rabbi Yitzchak bar Nachmani v'amru le Rabbi Shimon bar Nachmani chad amar K'memre Tahai Psuka V'chad Amar K'mi V'yichra'u l'seifa V'chol b'nei Yisrael Elohim Perez Tahal K'vod Hashem al Habayis V'yichra'u Apayim Aratza Al Haratzba Yishtachavu Lehodot Hashem Ki Tov Le'olam Ki Hodot L'Hashem Ki Tov Ki Le'olam Hodot. The Gemara asks, and what is the measure of that tearing? Rabbi Yitzchak bar Nachmani and one other sage who was with him disagree about this. And who is that other sage? Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi. And some say that it was Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, and some other sage who was with him. And who is that scholar? Rabbi Yitzchak bar Nachmani. And some say it was Rabbi Shimon bar Nachmani. One sage says it is as long as the time it takes to recite this following verse in its entirety, and one sage says it is as long as the time it takes to recite from the term "and they bowed" in the middle of that verse until the end. What is the verse? And when all the children of Israel saw how the fire came down and the glory of the Lord upon the house, and they bowed with their faces to the ground upon the pavement and prostrated themselves and praised the Lord, saying, "For He is good, for His steadfast love endures forever." 2 Chronicles 7:3. Tanu Abanan Kida Alapayim V'cheinu Oimer Vatikod Bat Sheva Apayim Eretz Kirya Al Birkayim V'cheinu Oimer Mechroa Al Birkav Hishtachava Zu Yishut Yadayim Reglayim V'cheinu Oimer Havo Navo Ani Ve'imcha V'achecha V'yishtachavot Lecha Arza. The Gemara discusses the different forms of bowing in greater detail. The sages taught the term kida indicates falling upon one's face. And so the verse states, then Bathsheba bowed vayikod with her face to the ground. 1 Kings 1:31. Kriya means descending upon one's knees. Kriya, yeah. Anachnu korim. Okay, means bending your knees. Okay, means kneeling through your knees. And so the verse states with regard to Solomon, he rose from before the altar of the Lord from kneeling upon his knees. 1 Kings 8:54. Hishtachava, this is prostrating oneself while spreading one's arms and legs in total submission. And so the verse states that Jacob asked in response to Joseph's relating of his dream, shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow down to you to the ground? Genesis 37:10, meaning spread out completely on the ground. Shehiyah Lemalkus, O Ein Tzarich Shehiyah Lemalkus. LeKorban Gemiri Shehiyah Lemalkus Lo Gemiri Shehiyah. Rava raises a dilemma. Is tarrying long enough to bow down necessary to incur lashes? If one was warned not to remain in the temple courtyard in a state of impurity, is he liable to receive lashes only if he remains there long enough to bow down, completely spread on the ground? Or is tarrying not necessary to incur lashes, and he is immediately liable to receive lashes? The Gemara clarifies the two possibilities. It is learned as a tradition that tarrying is necessary in order to incur liability to bring an offering, but not learned as a tradition that tarrying is necessary to become liable to receive lashes.